Okay, that's about 5 minutes after 6. So thank you everyone for joining us again. Welcome back for, I think this is the 5th of our introduction courses. We are going to continue with the for indebtedness, conversation which we started last time, which I apologize was interrupted. We had complete internet outage here for several hours, so be totally unable to continue. So I apologize for that. Hopefully we won't have a recurrence. We've had a few technical glitches, so this is just the way of our online Zoom world, and once again proving the Buddhist truth of impermanence. So keep it in mind in that way. Hopefully we'll manage through all of these challenges. So I think we left off with at the end of the second indebtedness, and that was indebtedness to living beings. So we had discussed the our connections to others, our parents, having an awareness of all the different people that we're connected to and ways in which our life is dependent on others, and the importance of that awareness. The Buddhist idea of emptiness is usually how this concept of sunyata, the Sanskrit word for emptiness, is often translated, but a better way to think of it is interdependence. All things are dependent on other things for their existence. Our life is dependent on other people. Our food is dependent on a whole host of people to work and bring that food to us. Truck drivers, fueling, road workers. There's just a tremendous amount of people that are involved in making every meal that we have possible. So that is a better way to look at, if you look at something like the for indebtedness, we talked a little bit last time about, they're expressed this way because of the Confucian history in East Asia, but they really are part of the sort of fundamental ideas within Buddhist philosophy as well. So I think sometimes the concepts may seem unusual or different for us depending on our cultural background, but they are, and I want to bring it up because a lot of modern books on Buddhism often try to find or create a Buddhism that doesn't have culture, Buddhism that in the author's mind doesn't have, what can we say, what they might perceive as cultural baggage or legacy, somehow a practice that is superstitious and things like this. So what I would encourage is within Buddhist teaching to give consideration to the meaning or the reason behind different practices. So they may, on the outside, when you first look at them, appear, what we might say, oh, that looks superstitious, or that looks like, that is, not the Buddhist teaching, but rather that's just something that's local culture, so I can discard it. A better way to look at it is, why is that expressed culturally? Why is that thing wrapped in a particular practice or expressed in a certain way? And I think when you see it that way, there's actually a Buddhist teaching in there. So at some point, someone created a cultural wrapper for a Buddhist idea rather than a cultural idea that took on Buddhist clothing. So oftentimes it's like this. So either way, we can learn from it. So it's not something that we should totally discard. So we'll pick up with the third. And the third indebtedness is our indebtedness to the nation. And there's, I think sometimes, depending on how we feel about our country or where we are in the world, this one may be difficult. So traditionally, regardless of whomever is in power, whomever is the ruler of the country, the temple prays for the health, long life, and safety of that ruler. And this is regardless of politics. And the reason for that is for us to try to work on separating the person from whatever they may represent. So if you're unhappy with what the political reality, or the king is repressive, something like this, you don't change the prayers that are done at the temple. You simply focus on the individual and hope that they can be transformed, and look at them separate from however the policies, or however the regime or the kingdom may be acting at that time. One of the reasons this is important is I think if we're having this conversation, their country is giving us something, right? The country is giving us order so that the temple can exist. The country is giving us stability and a certain amount of social cohesion so that we can actually, even meet in this forum virtually. So the fact that we can meet tonight is because there are not, marauding bands of outlaws in the streets outside. So we have a debt of gratitude to the nation. So historically in Japan, Shingon has been in charge of the prayer for the safety of the nation in Japan. And this goes back to Kobodaishi's time. So one of the things that Kukai petitioned the government to do was to set up a special, there's a small temple or chapel inside the imperial palace, where every year there is this service or prayer for the nation, so the health and safety of the country. So this has been done every year except for the years during World War II, and continues to this day. So the idea was you wanted to bring the ruler of the nation into the teaching and impress upon them how important their role as a leader was, so that if they understood the compassion and the teachings and acted wisely, that one person can benefit, millions of people. So, with varying degrees of success over the years of history, but it is still continued. So one of the reasons why we have this indebtedness to the nation is we probably didn't wake up, in a war zone this morning. We probably woke up to peace. We, regardless of, some of the lower level political squabbles or disagreements we may have, or, where we think we fall on a political spectrum, the nation as a whole is, something that we rely on. So we have to think of it from that perspective. How do we make it better? How do we contribute to it? What do we say about it? Are the way we talk about our country bringing people together or pushing people apart? Maybe some of you have lived in other countries and had this experience. I think once you live in another country, regardless of where it is, it gives you a different perspective on your home country. So some things you're going to see, oh, well, we did this better at home. And other things you may say, oh, this country does this or that thing better. When I was younger, I lived in China. I'm originally from Michigan. So one thing they definitely do better is snow removal is better in China. So they would get all the students in the university out and plow the street by hand, and they'd have the street cleared of snow in an hour or so. So it was like very, very efficient. You didn't have to wait for the plow truck to come down your street. It was done right away. Now, that may not have been the most pleasant way for the university students, but just a different way of thinking about connections to the nation, right? The students didn't question it. Of course, that's what we do in the winter. We go out and shovel the street. So, how we connect with our country is an important thing just to understand that we have this indebtedness. We may not think about it. We may not, wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I still have a country to live in." Um, well, I remember fall of the Berlin Wall. There was a Russian astronaut who was up in space, and so by the time he came back down, he didn't have a country anymore. He went from Soviet Union to Russia. So, um, you know, things can change. So our connection to the country is very important, right? Everything you've built in a career, wealth, all of these things are greatly dependent on the um, the country. So just keeping that in mind. So you may see, especially at larger services, prayers for the continuation of the nation and um, what long life of the ruler, and prayers for their health and wisdom and things like that. So those feelings should be expressed regardless of politics. So I think sometimes people are surprised by that, but I always say, you should really, um, your religion shouldn't be taking sides on people and groups, right? Should be more focused on issues. Um, so not is a particular person doing things right or wrong? Are we as a community doing it right or wrong, or do we have space for improvement? So there are there is specific advice in the Buddhist teaching for rulers. So, not abusing military power, recommendations that the ruler should observe the 10 precepts, um, basing policies on righteousness. Um, there's a lot of, there's actually a teaching for the protection of the nation and the sutra for rulers. So how they should actually comport themselves and, focus on the people. It's very common in East Asia, so China, Japan, and Korea, Vietnam as well, to look to the Chinese classics as great examples of how to rule. So there's all the smaller kingdoms that came and went over history are great examples of what not to do and how a person may fall into actions that bring down a country and the harm that it causes to the citizens. So, one thing I think you can definitely say, um, the Buddhist tradition encourages that kind of historical knowledge and scholarship. And if you read the works of Kukai, they're, filled with these kind of historical references. You want to make sure that you are, moral and upright and an outstanding person so that you don't suffer the same fate as this historical person, right? So very much an astute student of history. So um, it finding temples with that sort of history is also very common. So you may find a temple was established to pray for the harmony of the city or the country in a particular area. So that's often how temples are started. Most of the temples, well, all the temples here, and the Shingon temples in the United States, are started by members for local concerns. So family wants to ensure that there are yearly services, baby blessings, and things like that. So we don't yet have maybe a temple established for aspirational ideas, right? They were local people starting the temple, not someone saying, I founded a company and I'm going to give all my wealth, at my retirement to the establishment of the temple for the benefit of, training, monks, or for the publishing sutras or something like that. So we haven't quite reached that level in American historical development. So we're getting close, probably. I think there's probably a lot of people who, have that feeling, and there are examples in the United States where that is happening, but still have a way to go. Um, so the key there is, I think, from the leadership perspective, is morality, or leadership through morality is one of the key, right? Really having the leader focus. So a lot of examples in Japanese history. I won't belabor that point. So the fourth is the indebtedness to the three treasures. So our indebtedness to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the focus here is really on the core of the Buddhist teaching itself, how we see, our practice. And so the practice is grounded in the Buddha, the Dharma as a collection of the Buddhist teachings, and the Sangha as all of those involved in the study and following those teachings. In the old days, this was referred to as indebtedness to heaven and earth, which is a very, I guess, more of a Asian cultural way of thinking of it, right? You have indebtedness to everything below your feet and above your head. Right? You're dependent on the entire universe for your life and everything that you have. You're indebted to the rain, the wind, and you often hear this in more traditional Shingon prayers at the start of a service, prayers for seasonable weather, bountiful harvest, and things like that. Because it's really, without those things, we can't be here to study, right? If the world's imbalanced in all these different ways, we can't engage in the study. So all of those things come first. So you'll see that in the beginning of large services, a recognition that to be at the temple engaged in this practice is dependent upon all of these other social, cultural, and political factors. So the foreign indebtedness is really a way for us to open our eyes even more and understand that our spiritual practice is connected to something bigger than ourselves. And all the things around us feed into our spiritual practice. So in that way, we're not making distinctions between a believer and non-believer, or someone in the community and someone outside the community. This is to help broaden our view. We should have a very broad perspective. We should be including everyone in our gratitude, everyone in our consideration of what our practice is. The person in traffic in front of you with the bumper sticker that stands for all the things that makes you angry probably works in some part of the economy that benefits your life, right? So we're all connected. So the more we recognize that, the more we repeat it, the more we wear down that resistance to having other people, be part of our lives and be part of our gratitude and our existence. I think there's a lot of information available to us now about how to express our spiritual practice. And someone may say, what you're doing right there, that doesn't seem very Buddhist to you, right? To do that, and this or that. And I think if we look at the four indebtedness, we're really just trying to have a broader mind. Compassion, equanimity, all of these things are for us to really learn to be more accepting, more open. And the more open we are to other people, I think that's really how we break down barriers, right? Can we even listen? I think in the United States right now, we're at a point where, people are retreating to their own corners. And cutting off friend relationships and family relationships for we're becoming very polarized in ideas. So this should be an opportunity for us to say, can I be more open? Can I be more listening? So I would encourage you to ask questions, um, be genuine and honest. Tell me why you think this way. Tell me why you believe this. Tell me what's important to you. Tell me what you gravitate to and what you don't. I think all of those are helpful ways for us to reconnect rather than be so focused on well, this is what I think. Okay? This is the way I see it. So that's more of our tendency. So we should think about how do we engage our community. Um, no matter you know no matter the person I meet and their very strongly held opinion, there's still a lot of common ground. Um, you know, whether someone wants you to live in their community or not, they probably have a fondness for their community, and that's a fondness that you share. There's common ground somewhere. So these four indebtedness are, we all share a connection and a commonality, and refocusing on those things is very much part of our spiritual practice. Because if we get off the cushion, we said, oh, I said 10,000 mantras today and I bowed and I meditated. And then we immediately walk out and we look down our nose at someone else, or we start making divisions. I can't believe that person has a bumper sticker. I can't believe they did this, I have to fight for something, and fight against someone else. That's when we start to undermine our practice. So those are the four indebtedness. Indebtedness is. The way, so if you happen to have, a copy, this is the more recent translation of the service, the general service that's done on Koyasan in English translation. So if you happen to have that, those ideas are in here. And it's a way of taking our spiritual practice and then saying, okay, how do we put it into practice? How do we actually magnify that? And when I walk down the street, how do I put these mantras and these philosophical ideas into practice? How do I understand my connection to my larger community? And I think that's just as important as spiritual practice, right? So spiritual practice doesn't have to be mantra and meditation. Spiritual practice can be just a deeper recognition, a deeper gratitude for things that we take for granted. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that this evening, but that's the most kind of important component. Oh, yes. Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, just shared the Seattle has the service online. I believe it is the same. So there are, let's see here. The third pledge, I think we were going through those. Accepting the inevitability of cause and effect, we will devote ourselves to the liberation of all beings, including ourselves and all others. So last time we were going through these three pledges, and this is a basic idea of within Buddhism, is understanding cause and effect. This is actually, although we could say Buddhism postulates karma. So I'll say that so that we keep an open mind. We should keep an open and flexible mind or thinking about this. So Buddhism takes, the general kind of rules of science and says, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? So you can take these scientific truths. No energy is lost in a chemical reaction. It's just transformed. And you can take those same ideas and extrapolate those to mental and spiritual concepts. So this is a very ancient idea and understanding, but there are definitely some overlap in the spiritual teaching. So that's really the third pledge. We're understanding this idea of cause and effect. We're thinking about it at all times. And because we understand cause and effect, the third pledge is saying we should devote ourselves to liberating sentient beings, including ourselves, right? So the Bodhisattva vow is not, it's very much based on your ability. It's based on once you start to practice for yourself, you gradually begin to expand that out. Once you have this insight, you start to slowly put it into practice. And then when you become a superhuman being like a bodhisattva, then you can directly engage in helping others. But there's a vast number of ways that we can help others. There's a vast number of opportunities that we can reach out a helping hand at whatever level we're at, right? Taking one extra second to thank someone who's working in a grocery store, right? Who's working in a job that can't be done from home, and say, hey, I really appreciate that, you know, you're here and stocking the shelves because my family's life depends on it. They appreciate it. It changes their life. All of these things are important to how we express our ultimate goal of being bodhisattvas. So we can't do it silently until, you know, we have 1,000 arms and you know, infinite eyes to see the suffering of others. If we slow down a little bit, we'll see the suffering of others. We'll see how we can help. So this is the third pledge, is really fundamental to trying to put it into practice in whatever way we can at the moment, you know, where we are, acting locally, acting within our capability. So, okay. So those are the overview of the the various pledges, just to finish off where we were last time before the internet undermined our class. So we're going to go on to the 5 core teachings. So depending on if you happen to have a Shingon temple near you, you may find this in the service book. So a lot of the temples that have on the West Coast are still using service books from the 50s and 60s, and they have it in there. Others are using the more modern translation. It also has it. Some are using, I think there was a version that was printed in the 70s that might not have it. But either way, I'll do a screen share so you can see what these 5 are. But before we do that, are there any questions on what we covered last time, since I didn't get a chance to ask you because the internet gods decided when the class was going to end?
Okay, I think I totally missed something, Sensei.
Sure.
When you're talking about the 3 pledges,
Yes.
is that a direct correlation to the service, or no? Wait, I think I'm lost.
It is. So some of the service books actually have the 3 pledges in them, or they're sometimes referred to as the 3 articles of faith. So it depends on the temple. So different temples are using different versions of the service order. But they are usually part, if you go to Koyasan, you'll find it in most of the texts in Japanese.
Okay, I'm familiar with the service, so that's helpful to me. I just didn't know if I was correct in making the correlation. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yep. The next step are connected a little bit more coherently, because we're going to talk about the 10 precepts, and that's directly in all of the services. So.
Sensei, this is Joe.
Yes.
So related to, I think that was Jamie's question. So I was looking at what Jamie just posted from the service, and I've seen this service before, Shingon service. Can you just point out in what section the 3 pledges or the articles are, kind of where in the flow of that? You know, I see the Heart Sutra and I see the 10 precepts, and where does the pledges come in?
So they're usually a preamble to the service. So let me look at the PDF here. So the one that's posted on Seattle's website does not have it.
Okay.
But if you, so some temples are using this book, if it'll focus. So this one is the most recent English translation from Japanese. And it actually has these let's see, 3 articles of faith.
Okay, thank you.
The English. And then the Go Komoku, the 5 core teachings. So these are summation of the, what can I say? How you should think of the teaching as a whole and how to actually put it into practice in society.
Thank you, Sensei.
Oh, so a good question in the comments. Why pray for the continuation of a nation if all things are impermanent? Isn't it clinging of sorts? We would pray for the continuation of the nation because, well, first, not, it's not a partisan thing. So it's not, I'm going to continuation for the, pray for the nation as long as it's ruled by the party I prefer. So it's not something like that. It's more along the lines of, as human beings, we have ordered ourselves into countries, and countries are, wrappers for cultures and traditions, but also, stability for social groups and just life in general. So not so much in the United States, but let's say you live in a country with a national health system. So praying for the continuation of that nation is also praying for the continuation that everyone has healthcare. Everyone has a stable means of receiving food and education. So those things are important in a temporal or limited sense for your development as a human being. So it would be the same as praying for your health. In order for you to study the Dharma, you need to be healthy. So in an ultimate sense, we understand these things are temporary, but there are practical things that you need as a human being. You need food, clothing, and shelter. You need, warmth in the winter. You need shade in the summer. So our bodies have certain requirements. So it's natural that we're going to pray for these, basic concepts of stability. I won't be praying that, I hope everyone gets a Lexus, right? That's not necessarily useful. You might want it, but it's not necessary. But the nation as a whole is, important for people's stability, life, longevity, lack of stress. All these things are quite important for your mental health and whatnot. So that would be, a proper focus. So when the Buddha was alive, he never told, kings to give up their countries. He, told them you need to look after people in the proper way. So country, during the Buddhist time, you had monarchs. I think it was really seen as an extension of the family, right? If you're at the top, you need to look at everyone and take care of them like you would your family members. So we still need to be taken care of. So we can't read, impermanence into nihilism, right? That would be the extreme. So when Buddhism is referred to as the middle way, it's the middle way between both extremes. So we're not nihilistic, like, well, because everything's impermanent, then nothing matters. Nor are we on the other end that says, well, since everything's impermanent, then I'm just going to, drink and party, and you've one life to live, who cares? Nothing matters. Right? So it's very much in the middle. And that middle is actually very hard for us as human beings to find. We're always bouncing back between the extremes. We find ourselves in unhappiness, and we tend towards nihilistic. Well, nothing matters anymore. I didn't get what I want. I give up on everything. Or we achieve what we want, and then we party and we expend all of our energy, and then we fall back to the other side. So finding the middle is actually really a challenge for us. So this was sort of one of the great insights the Buddha had, because most religions are world denying. Right? This world is corrupt. This world is useless. Everything, you're going to get all of your reward in the other world. And Buddhism doesn't say that. And a lot of philosophical systems say, life is absurd. This is meaningless, right? So just understand it, but you can't control anything. So, nothing matters. So here came the Buddha and really announced something that was between those two, which is actually quite different, right? And Shingon itself also takes that to a further extreme and says, rather than seeking enlightenment later, make this world the world of enlightenment, right? Really practice the spiritual teachings now so that people's lives around you are made better. Why are we waiting? Why are we putting off this compassionate action? This should be done now. And Kukai really practiced that. So there's a lot of, on the ground, hands-on, what can I say, relief work that he did, practical benefit he gave people. He was an engineer. He's like, well, let's make people's lives better. Let's build things. So that was a very much of a, your Buddhist practice is not limited to the temple or reading books and, your prayer beads. It's very much how you live and express. So that's the middle way. Right? That's more the proper expression. And you'll see this, I think it was done quietly throughout Buddhist history, but, temples provide a very strong social safety net historically. So before countries offered kind of social services, temples were doing that. And they still do. So. Okay. Any other questions before those are good questions.
Sensei, did you see Gabriella's question above that?
Oh, thank you. I missed that one.
No worries, thanks.
I'm getting older, so I need glasses that are different. Oh yes, Mars of the internet. I was going to talk about that later tonight, actually, but maybe we'll just jump in. So we were going to move on to the 10 precepts and how you actually practice. The key, right? Keeping in mind the middle way component. How should you put your practice into action in the community? First, the most important lesson my teacher ever gave me was know your capacity. And I think knowing your capacity is really important, and then building your capacity. So this is the most important thing to start with, building your capacity, because our tendency is we want to give and give and give, but we haven't considered our capacity or built capacity. What do I mean by that? There's a common phrase these days where people say they have compassion fatigue. And personally, I don't believe there's anything such as compassion fatigue. What I think is people have never been taught how to develop compassion. They don't really know what compassion is. So they exhaust themselves trying to help others without any regard to where their capacity is, right? So if, let's say your capacity is 1 liter of water and you're trying to put out a house fire, this isn't going to work. So you need to know what your capacity is and then respond to situations that match your capacity. So you have to sort of understand your spiritual, emotional, psychological capacity and understand where you are and then respond to people's needs, as you can. And that may mean asking someone else for help, right? So if you see the house fire and you know your capacity is 1 liter, then the best response is to call the fire department. If someone, knocked over a candle and the grass is burning, then your 1 liter is useful. So it's really knowing your limit. So in our general education, we don't have any teaching about compassion, emotional capacity, giving. None of this is taught in school, but then we get into careers where we're expected to serve others and we've not been prepared for that. So the best thing to do is first, as part of your spiritual practice, is consider your capacity. What things upset you? How upset do you become? Are those emotions debilitating? And there shouldn't be any judgment about that. You just need to know specifically, what is your capacity? That's the key point. And if your capacity is to call for help, then call for help. If your capacity is to roll up your sleeves and jump in, then that's fine. If your capacity is you have the connections, with people who can help the situation, then ask those connections. So I think that's the first step. And then whatever your capacity is, then you should help to the degree that you're able. And I think that's where, again, at least amongst Americans, we tend to, really throw ourselves, and then we destroy our own health and our own bodies, and then we become a burden. And that's not skillful. That's not helpful. So if you're, you can give joy by smiling at people. If you go for a walk in your neighborhood and you wave at people, cars going by, you can bring joy. All of these things are very useful. You never know how much energy you're giving someone else. So you may think, well, my capacity is very small. That's okay. You give from that capacity. All of these things are spiritual practice. You may ask, really inquire with someone how they're doing. I know, I can remember many times when older people, stopped and shared their life wisdom with me. And I was very touched by that. And, they're just happy to give. But you can also give by listening, right? A lot of younger people don't want to listen to older people. They don't want to spend time hearing their stories. But that's a tremendous amount of giving in spiritual practice. So just sitting with them, visiting with them. When I was in Hawaii, there was a young man who would come to the temple all the time. And one of the ways he practiced, he was very, I could say he's life of the party type personality. So wherever he showed up, people got happier. So he recognized that about himself. So he lived in a housing project, big, tall, low-income area, and he would just knock on all the doors of the old people. Auntie, uncle, do you need anything? I'm going to the store. Oh, what are you cooking? It smells so good. And he just went around and talked to them. That was his practice. And as a result, all the old people knew him, and they felt safer because it wasn't the safest housing project. So he was giving them fearlessness. He was giving them joy. It didn't cost him anything but time. It was within his capacity because he was life of the party all the time. So it just, took getting up and knocking on the doors and walking down the halls. So it can be very simple, right? It doesn't have to be, some sort of, oh, here's your prescription for spiritual practice. It just requires us to move. It requires us to do a little bit of action. So make sure I don't miss any other questions. Okay. Yeah. If you type it in and I miss it, please let me know. I'm not intentionally ignoring any of it. Just if I sit too close, then you're looking at the top of my head. So since Gabriella mentioned the Mars of the internet, I'm going to do these out of order and talk about the 10 precepts. So in the PDF that Jamie shared, I know it's in there in Seattle's service order. We usually recite the 10 precepts during services, and they're very short statements. If you look at the Japanese, it's three kanji, right? So there's no explanation. So I'm going to skip the first three. We're going to go to the number 4, and that's what we're going to do tonight. Then we'll do the others out of order. So all the 10 precepts can be broken up into actions of body, speech, and mind. So they are ways of purifying our body, speech, and mind. This is a key teaching in Shingon because these are the 3 mysteries. These are kind of the core essence of what holds all the practices together. So in Shingon practice, there's always mudra, mantra, right, what you're saying, and visualization, what you're doing with your mind. So you're never just putting your hands together and, watching TV. Oh, I have gasho, but I'm watching a football game. Or you're never saying the mantra, but beating somebody, Namodaishi Enjo, Kongo. Oh, okay, great. So you're trying to unify all 3. So if you unify all 3, then you bring all of the karma producing components of your self to your spiritual practice. So this is Shingon. Shingon means mantra. Shingon implies speech as a fundamental component of spiritual practice, of using the voice. So there are 4 precepts that guard your speech. So if you're going to be, what's the old saying in America, right? You use that mouth to kiss your mother, if you say something naughty. So do you use the same mouth to recite the mantra that you've been saying naughty things or negative things with? So the first one is false statements. Sometimes it's translated in the book as lying. I think lying is hard. It's a harder word when this really means anything that's not true, which can be slightly different. So we use language as human beings to communicate. We've been doing it in multiple cultures, and all of these cultures, people tell lies. So there's no non-lying culture, right? And one of the reasons we need to look at it is, why do we speak falsely, right? Why do people lie? And the key understanding about this precept is you're trying to lead by example. I don't mean you, but the Buddhist teaching leads by example, because the Buddhist teaching doesn't include lies. There's tons of near transcripts of discourse between the Buddha and students, and high-ranking monks and students correcting people's misconceptions. So a lot of the teaching is just correcting misconceptions. So that's the kind of the first stage, right? The teaching is not lying to you. Culturally, I think we need to be on guard about how we speak. And we use a lot of language that is not accurate in the West. So we embellish our resumes, we position ourselves, we go for a job interview, and why do you want this job? And you're thinking, well, because I need to pay rent and I like eating food. But you're like, oh no, I think I can really, contribute to the country, the company, and the skills that I bring, and that's partially true. I interviewed for a job once, and they said, "What are you going to do if you don't get this job?" And I was honest. I was like, "I'll be homeless." So they were a little shocked. I was very honest. I need the job. So false speech can, connects to a lot of things. And part of it is building our awareness of when our words are not completely true, and when and why the words are not true, right? Can we use other words? So part of this is slowing us down. When we're on the internet, as Gabriella noted, we will say things that we would never say in person. We may be people that we are not in real life. So that's, there's many ways for us to observe this precept. So it's not just, the big things that you might think of as a lie. It's all the little ways that we're not truthful. And again, it starts with ourselves. When are we not truthful with ourselves? Right? Oftentimes we are not truthful with ourselves. So that's the first. The second one is, sometimes it says careless speech or exaggeration, which is really sarcasm. This one, I think culturally we have to be aware of, because in the West we use a lot of sarcasm. When I was younger, I remember being in an international group of students, and they asked me not to use sarcasm because it made them very angry. Partially, they didn't connect to it culturally. Partially, it was hard to translate, but they took it as like constant lying. But if you're, culture connected with, English, so Brit, American, Canadian, Australian, we may use more sarcasm, and it's a way of social cohesion and bonding. So being aware of how we exaggerate things is important, right? And in when we do it, a lot of it is done mindlessly, carelessly. So how our words communicate, what feelings our words communicate, and whether those feelings are genuine is also important. You can make a deep connection with words. You can make a deep connection with language. And the way you make that deep connection is with real honesty, real, your words are coming from a true place of thoughtfulness. When can you tell someone is not being, when are they exaggerating? Because they have to increase their volume. They have to, pound the table when they say things. They flail their arms more. They might use bigger words. That doesn't always mean that the listener is going to believe it or be moved by it, right? So some of the most impactful words I've ever heard have been said simply and humbly. So this precept isn't none of these precepts are like, don't do it. The precepts are, think about what you're doing, have deeper insight into what you're doing. And as you do, you'll naturally change, right? As you do, you'll naturally start to see how your speech affects others. So again, on the internet, we will say things that we would never say in person. We would, position ourselves in language in ways that we would never put ourselves in if we were face to face. So it's something to guard, right? I think right now we're seeing this more and more. The next one is abusive speech, and this is probably the height of abusive speech in the world. Right? People have no problem attacking one another. Our news is filled with reports of verbal attacks on people. Our political leaders, social leaders, religious leaders are verbally attacking people. So here we have in the precepts in Buddhism is to avoid abusive speech. What is abusive speech? It's speech that leads to misery. When a person becomes so emotional and tries to, inflict their emotional pain onto someone else through their words. You'll see this when people get angry. They start to speak more abusively. And it can be very impactful, right? We know this when it comes to children. We know language can be very harmful in relationships. So the closer you get to someone, the words are even more impactful. But it happens all the time, right? We may be subject to it ourselves. So this kind of abusive speech is something that you should try to avoid, obviously. But think about, there's probably a time when all of us have been spoken to in an abusive manner. It could have been short-lived. It may have been, long-lived. But think about the impact. So that's what the Buddhist teaching is asking us to do, is really think about the impact. When's the last time someone spoke to you abusively and you carried it with you for quite a while, right? You had to talk to someone else about it because it was so harmful and hurtful. In America, we have freedom of speech, and legally speech is not just what you say, it's also your expression. So it can be what you do with your body. It can be where you place yourself. It's nonverbal communication also. But, the law recognizes that not speaking can be speaking, right? So if you should speak up, not speaking up can be harmful, right? Not speaking out can be harmful. Hand gestures can be harmful, right? You use a certain finger, and that's harmful to someone. Which one is it? This one. Yeah, you use a certain finger, it could be harmful. All of these things are speech. So again, on the internet, people say the most harmful things because they're behind a screen and a keyboard. They would never say it in person. So this is something we have to be very aware of. We can get very passionate about things, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't share a perspective or an opinion, but the words you choose are very important. And we have to really give thought to what we say, and then also how we say it, right? The tone, our cadence. One of the reasons why you'll see Binzaitin, the goddess, Hindu goddess Saraswati, why you see Saraswati in Shingon is preaching the Dharma is very important. And the primary way that we express ideas is through speech. And Saraswati's great skill is eloquence. Right? Can we express these very beautiful ideas in a beautiful manner. So you'll often see Saraswati in temples for this reason, right? This very deep, wisdom-filled tradition has to be spoken through an imperfect medium like language. So can we do that? And doing so and learning to do so patiently is very important. So the last of the three that come that have connection with speech is speaking to cause discord. So words that you use to drive wedges between people, words that bring disharmony to a group. And this is very important. And actually, it kind of connects to Muhammad's question earlier about, why are nations important? As human beings, we need one another. We need community. We need families. We need, we order ourselves into groups. Even the temple is a group, right? So the temple has board members. We have a community. And so for someone to say negative things in that community drives people away from spiritual practice, right? So you could undermine someone's spiritual practice by, spreading rumors, or, what do you always see in the movies, right? The king is on the throne and someone comes up and whispers in their ear, and, then the king says, oh, get rid of that person, right? There's always someone in the shadows pulling the strings. So that kind of speech can be very harmful because it undermines the work of a lot of other people. Again, see this constantly on social media. It could be the most beautiful thing in the world, right? Somebody in the community, rescues 10 kittens from a storm drain and then goes to a local children's shelter and shares the kittens with the kids, and everybody's happy. And someone will be like, I bet the kittens have fleas and now the kids are infected. And, they'll just instantly this negativity. So somehow we've gotten to a point where, even the most beautiful moments, there instantly someone's there to spoil it. I'm on a Facebook group that just, the whole point of the Facebook group is to share beautiful pictures in Oregon. That's it. There's no commentary, just, have you ever been to this part of the state? Look how beautiful it is. That's it. And in the last year, there's constantly conversation about if someone posts a picture of Portland, not making it political, because people say, oh, look at this beautiful picture of Portland. And then someone says, oh, all the political demonstrations and everyone there is crazy. And so every week if you make a negative comment about the city, you'll be kicked off the group. The group is strictly for sharing, beautiful photos of nature and this thing. So I thought, wow, even beautiful pictures of nature have become a source of speaking to cause discord. So I think right now, this is a great opportunity to observe how powerful these precepts are. To be honest, when I first recited these 23 years ago or something, I thought, okay, easy, right? This shouldn't be a problem. And now I see a world where all we talk about are the negative repercussions of other people's speech when it's intended to undermine harmony. So at the very least, this is a great lesson in how important the precept is, but also a great warning for us to really be on guard that we don't immediately jump in and say, how dare you say something so negative? You're a horrible person and, you should go, and, this kind of response. So it's really about guarding ourselves, because it destroys our meditative calm. It destroys other people's meditative calm. So one of the, during the Buddhist time, they recognized one of the key ideas that you'll see in the Vinaya, right? The rules for monks and nuns is not causing disharmony in the Sangha. Because when there's disharmony in the Sangha, again, you undermine people's ability to progress. You're undermining their spiritual community. You're undermining, could be years of practice. And that kind of like pulling the rug out from others in something so important as their spiritual progress can be very damaging. So when we do it in the service, it's, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So don't read them as like a thou shalt not, or don't read them as this is a sin. Always look at it as what is it telling me? Because all of these precepts go in two directions, right? What is it doing to others? But what is it doing to me? Right? So we may be at a point in our spiritual practice where, again, our capacity may not be big enough to consider others yet. But we should have come to spiritual practice at the very least for ourselves. And as we learn more about ourselves, that gives us insight into how to build our capacity for others. Right? I don't want to be spoken to abusively. Therefore, I'll try not to do it. Right? I'll try to catch myself or be aware when I do it. I don't want someone to speak in a way that undermines my social structure, my family structure, my friend groups. So I'll try to be aware of when I do it. We're all going to do it. It's going to happen. It's more about being aware so that we slowly stop doing it. It may take a long time, right? It may take a long time. We may be a long time before we really are aware of the little things. And speech is the hardest because we'll just say stuff, right? It just comes out. So we have to be really on guard. So part of meditation training is slowing ourselves down. Why do we want to slow down? We slow down so that we can catch, right? It comes out of the mouth and we can catch it. Oh, right, before someone hears it. And then we train to slow down. Okay. So that's 4 of the 10 precepts. Are there any questions on those? And me asking questions is always like time to sip tea so I can. No questions? Okay. So this Thursday is Thanksgiving, so we will not have our Thursday evening lecture. So please enjoy time with family. I think this is a very special year to reflect on what we're thankful for. We talked about gratitude in the for indebtedness. This is a really great time to really focus on that gratitude. So we may not, here in Oregon, we may not be able to meet with family. That's a recommendation. So depending on where you are, please kind of keep in mind just to limit your connections, physical exposure with others and whatnot. So please do stay safe. I will dedicate the merit for our class this evening.
Kosho, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
A question popped up in the chat. Gabriella wants to know, what's the best way to carefully present the Dharma to non-Buddhists?
Oh, I would say it's through modeling behavior. So there is no proselytization in Buddhism. So we don't go out knocking on doors or standing on street corners, handing out information. You won't find us at the airport, Have you heard the Buddhist news? So we don't have that style. But making the Dharma available is important. Historically, that's meant funding publication programs, building temples, large, public statuary, making things available so that it's known. We have new lights on the outside of the temple, which will soon illuminate a bigger sign. So we're making it available, right? People will know we're there. It'll be a more visible sign than the current one. So you want to be visible and available. So I think that's the key. But actively spreading Buddhism kind of in this way, we have to be careful. So I think a good example or a good model is the group Ziji. And Ziji is a Taiwanese group. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Ziji, but they are a Buddhist compassion relief organization. So they're very similar to the Red Cross. They do a lot of work. I was a member in college, actually. And one of the things holding Ziji back is first the name, and it's primarily very much embedded in the Chinese community. So a lot of people are not familiar, but doing things actively in the community can be helpful. For myself, when I was younger, my family is not Buddhist. So my grandmother would put me on the spot to say, the prayer at holiday, and I would slowly sneak in Buddhist ideas into the prayer, and say things like, I'm very thankful for, all the people who made our meal possible, and I'm keeping in mind all those who can't be with us, and holding compassion for those political leaders that are working hard for the benefit of our country and world peace. And so I would slip it in little by little. So I think that's I'll put the name in the chat. So that's the name of the group. They were founded by a Buddhist nun in Taiwan. And so you'll often see the people wearing blue and white shirts. They have a large facility outside LA where big warehouse with food, and some of the Chinese temples are associated with them. I think it would be great to see an American version of that where people could get involved with local, as a local charity. But thus far, we don't have anything quite like that. So the resources are quite different in the American Buddhist context than in Taiwan. But their model is quite beautiful. So, for example, in college, we would go to nursing homes and give just demonstrations. People would play music, and we would make it known we were a Buddhist group, but there was no overt Buddhist teaching. It was just anything that was calming. So back then I used to do Iaido, Japanese sword. So I would do a demonstration of Iaido, and wow, there's really nothing better to get old folks at a retirement home to sit up and take notice in their wheelchairs and their walkers than you take out a real sword and start swinging it. So it was a lot of fun, right? So they invited me to do that. It was a lot of fun. So, any way that you can give back. It is my hope that eventually we'll grow big enough that we have a community outreach component. Thus far, locally at the temple, it's educational classes and the big community focused activity is flower arranging, and there's demonstrations in Portland for that. So of course, all that's on hold for COVID, but that's also a very beautiful way of sharing Buddhist teaching in a cultural sense, where it doesn't feel a heavy-handed religious, you should do this kind of thing. So I think those are the ways that you can share. But I would definitely recommend, look through some Buddhist ideas, look at the Metta Sutta, and you can incorporate those ideas. It is Thanksgiving's coming up. What are you thankful for? I'm thankful, for so many things, and adapting those ideas. It's always been welcome. I've spoken at Christian churches and expressed these ideas from a Buddhist perspective. I just take out the word Buddha and everyone's very happy. So there's a lot of, interfaith ground to cover there. So when people inquire, then I tell them, yeah, I'm Buddhist and this kind of thing. But we won't be knocking on your door. We don't think that's a skillful way. So make sure I didn't miss any others. No? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. As Jamie put in the text, we do have a event coming up Saturday, so after Thanksgiving. If you'd like to participate in our more social activity and share a photo of something that that you saw that came out of your mindfulness practice, or just from being mindful, or even just the idea of mindfulness, please do. I think I found my photo the other day, so I'll try to share it with everyone. So please, if you'd like to do that, we welcome you. Other than that, please do have a enjoyable, highly unusual, but safe Thanksgiving in whatever way you're celebrating this year. I know a lot of us are doing so either by ourselves or in very small groups, but at any rate, please be safe and stay healthy. So it's good to see everyone. Take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next class. So have a good night.
Thank you, Sensei. Everyone
Thank
says
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.